I'm hoping the Big Ten has to modify their system for us.
Probably like getting grade 10 sandpaper rubbed on your face every day.
I mean, we say it all the time, whether, there's two types of turds, you're a sinker or you're a floater, but you're still a turd, right? I
mean, we are about players and players playing the plays and not necessarily the plays.
Welcome to the Varsity Club podcast. My name is Derek Peterson. Joining me this week, fall-hating, anti-hoodie, my best friend, Greg Smith. Greg, hello, how are you?
I am very well. How are you? It's funny. I've been so much in a better mood this week because it's been unseasonably warm here in Nebraska. Last night for the Class A state championship game, I actually wore a hoodie, but that was all I had to go with for a state final game. It's great. It was a high of 70 yesterday. So I was very happy. We were out of hoodie weather, even though I wore one. It made me very happy.
It has not been unseasonably warm in Chicago. It's been very cold. I wore workout shorts. My walk to the gym is brief, but it's just long enough to where if it's cold outside and I'm wearing true workout stuff, not sweats and stuff to I guess prepare for that outside walk, it's like a miserable walk. It's it's in that sweet spot of length, and it was a miserable walk. I wore shorts and one of those dry fit hoodies, and it was very, very cold. It was also pretty cold in Madison, but jump around made it better. Jump around is so cool. That was so much fun.
Madison, I know. So Husker fans had bad experience out there. I forget how many years ago it was. I think it was the very first year that Nebraska went to Madison when they first joined the Big Ten. And Wisconsin fans kind of took exception with Nebraska being picked to win the league, and they treated Nebraska fans very poorly that weekend. There are tons of stories out there about that. So Nebraska fans are sour on Madison. I think Madison's a great college town. I think one of the best college towns. And Wisconsin football games are pretty fun.
It was super great.
Yeah,
I've been there twice, and I've come away both times thinking this would be a cool place to spend college football falls. Yeah,
that was almost my life. Almost.
Greg, we're going to talk about Adrian Martinez on this podcast because Nebraska's fourth year quarterback is not going to play potentially his last game as a Nebraska quarterback. So we're going to talk a little bit about him in a bit. First things first, for people that are listening to this podcast, if you are not subscribed to the Straight Up Breakdown podcast with Greg Smith, go fix that right now. Go subscribe to it. Leave him a 5-star review. It's a wonderful show. Go listen to it. Also, in the Hail Varsity Network, we have the Nebraska Preps postgame show with Jacob Padilla and Damon Benning. Jacob called me out for plugging his podcast last week, but not actually saying what the title was. So the Nebraska Preps postgame show. Jacob also has a basketball pod with Jacob Bigelow. Go listen to that. Also, Brandon Vogel has the IID Preview podcast. Subscribe to that one. And then Aaron Sorensen and Sasha Durkin have the Mind Your Own podcast. So go listen to that. Also subscribe to the website, hailvarsity.com/subscribe. Get everything. New magazine's coming soon. I think that's all the stuff that I got to hit. It's Thanksgiving week, so this podcast is a day earlier than it usually is. If you guys are listening to this on Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving. If you're listening to it on the drive to a family member's house, I hope the food is wonderful, and I hope the turkey is not dry, and I hope that everything is awesome. Greg, first of all, happy early Thanksgiving. We're recording this on a Wednesday. Second, what's the best Thanksgiving dish in your opinion?
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. The best dish is macaroni and cheese.
Okay.
It's a tier of one pick. I don't know, it's hard to go. It's for me, that is the thing. I have now become the person that makes the macaroni and cheese here in kind of my sphere, which is bizarre. And when I tell my family back home that, they laugh. But people enjoy it. They eat it. So it works. But yeah, mac and cheese all the way for me.
There are 3 large platters of mac and cheese sitting in my refrigerator right now. The goat slaved away for 5 hours yesterday making some Thanksgiving sides. Mac and cheese was one of them. The cheese sauce was heavenly. I'm so excited to eat this thing tomorrow.
Yeah,
I cannot wait. Mac and cheese is great. I'm right with you.
I'm happy for you. I'm excited. Look, I'm kind of like wiggling over here. I'm excited for you that you have 3 giant things of mac and cheese. I'm happy.
Mac and cheese is great. I have changed my tune on stuffing. I wasn't a big stuffing person as a kid, but now I'm all about the stuffing. I don't like casseroles. And I'm also not a big pie person. So I have that in common with Mac Jones. So if I want to be a first round pick into the NFL and a high tier quarterback, I think I can do that now.
Yeah, I'm not. I was with you until you said pie. I am a pie guy. Pie is just delicious. Like, you can't go wrong with pie. I don't stuffing, dressing, whichever iteration of it that you like. I don't like either one. Casseroles was something I never had really growing up at Thanksgiving. So like, I can take it or leave it, but I'm very upset with you about the pie thing. That's weird.
Well, like green bean casserole is like up there with me in coleslaw. Like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to smell it. I don't want to touch it. Don't have it anywhere near me. Like
you can get
that garbage out of here.
It's not a bottom tier side like coleslaw.
No, it is.
I am not craving it for sure.
It is a bottom tier side. Especially green bean casserole, bottom tier side. I have angered people. I will probably anger people with the pie comment. Fruit pie is just not for me. But let me try to win.
Well, hold on. No. We gotta hold on real quick.
Well,
so what dessert do you have?
I was just about to say.
Sorry.
Okay. Hopefully, I can win people back with this. For my entire life, we have had French silk pie from Village Inn. That kind of pie is chef's kiss. It's so good. It's beautiful. So. But specifically Village Inn. We've had French silk pies from other places, and they just don't do it right. It's
hit or miss. Yeah, it is. That's one of those things that I didn't realize until, because I had Village Inn French silk pie for so long. There's another place that's very similar to it in Bolingbrook, in Illinois, called Baker Square. It's very similar to Village Inn. It's basically the same type of French silk pie. And then I had it somewhere else, and I was like, wait, this isn't French silk. This isn't. What is this?
Yeah. Yep. Shout out Village Inn, sponsor this podcast, and give me pies. And I don't know how that would work, but if we can find a way to get some pies on this podcast, that'd be great. But specifically French silk pie, none of the garbage fruit pies.
A giant apple pie upstairs that I'm taking to this Thanksgiving.
The goat looks at me with daggers in her eyes.
Is she currently making a French, like a blueberry pie?
No, but I'm sure there will be like an apple pie or like some kind of pie like that at Thanksgiving dinner when we have it. Big news of the week, Greg, is that James Franklin has a new shiny 10-year contract to stay with Penn State. And it's reported that Mel Tucker is getting an even more lucrative 10-year contract to stay at Michigan State. Jimbo Fisher got a 10-year contract at Texas A&M. UTSA's Jeff Traylor got a 10-year contract. How do you feel about? Yeah, you're like what? That's the random one thrown in.
Yeah,
one of these things does not belong. How do you feel about? We're not even going to talk about the finances of a situation, but just a college football program committing itself to one person for 10 years when we're seeing like Dan Mullen just got fired with like a 31-17 record or something insane like that. How do you feel about these super long-term contracts? Mike Gundy signed like a lifetime contract too, I think.
Right. I actually like them. Like, and I kind of surprised myself in how I arrived at this. And it's actually tied to a little bit of, like you mentioned, Dan Mullen kind of getting fired after a few years or a handful of years, and actually having success down in Florida and Gainesville. I think that programs need to be allowed more runway to build, but I also think that there needs to be like a level of being okay with being a pretty good program that occasionally has a breakthrough season or two. And what I mean by that, like Penn State, I think is a really good example of that. A team that should never really be like worse than a 7-5 type of team, should always be like in that 8-win conversation should basically be their starting point. And then there should be years where Penn State really gets on a roll and they win 10 or 11 and go to a Rose Bowl. Like that is, I think, where Penn State lands. And I think that that's where James Franklin would continuously steer them. And so them committing 10 years to him, I think is fine. I kind of feel in a pretty similar way about Jimbo Fisher. Like the UTSA thing was kind of weird, but on the whole, I actually like that. But the problem is on the other hand, is I think that when it's not working, I think it's okay to pull the plug. But I don't think that, like for Florida, because that's the one that is the most recent one, I don't think that that necessarily was that type of case, even though there's a lot of different things going on with that Florida situation and why they thought the direction wasn't going the right way. But I like the 10-year commitments to coaches, even though we know that at least one of these, the coach won't make it the whole 10 years, whether it's he leaves on his own or he ends up getting fired anyway.
Yeah. The contract that Franklin signed, it seems like it's pretty friendly to him if he wants to go someplace else. He's guaranteed a lot of money if Penn State fires him. So he's, for the next few years, he's like, no one's ever virtually unfireable, but he's like pretty close, like for the next few years, just in terms of the amount of money that they would owe him. I've seen a lot of reactions to the Penn State thing specifically, like James Franklin doesn't deserve it. Like, what has James Franklin done? I've seen some of like, good for the Big Ten with paying James Franklin and paying Mel Tucker. And sort of like the narrative that the Big Ten hasn't always prioritized super big contracts to keep really good coaches in the conference. And that's something that the SEC does. And that's something that if the Big Ten wants to continue to play with the SEC, they'll need to keep doing. I can see that. I can see sort of the, well, what has James Franklin done arguments. And I can also see that like he's recruiting at a really high level. He's getting investment from the program to improve some things, which will be good. I'm with you in a theoretical sense on what the like the long-term contract would signal, because it would signal that programs are saying, hey, you can have like a year like what Penn State had last year, or like, you know, not that Michigan did this with Jim Harbaugh, but like a random year where you have a losing record. And we're not going to freak out and overreact, sort of in the way that Florida has overreacted to the Dan Mullen situation. It's one of those things where, like, in theory, I support it because I wholeheartly agree with everything you just said about programs need more time, coaches need more time, because that's what I've been arguing with Scott Frost. And that we have sort of like accelerated the clock on how quickly a coach needs to produce results. Part of it is like programs feel like coaches need to produce results because they're paying them a lot of money. So if we could fix that discrepancy, how much coaches are getting paid in general, like there probably wouldn't be such a hurry to win games so quickly. But there's the skeptical side of me that just says, I don't think these programs actually have the stomach to do that on the whole. Like, I think Nebraska is an exception, and Trev Albert's saying, we're going to give Frost another year. I think he's the exception. I don't think he's the rule. And I'm just skeptical that programs will actually continue to express patience and continue to believe in patience. Because like one of the things that, the coaching carousel this particular season has sort of brought up, one of the talking points that I've seen a lot of people hitting on, is that there are a lot of programs right now that have unwarranted belief that they deserve better football seasons, that they should have better football seasons than they deserve, that they should be winning more games based on the fact that they should be winning more games. I don't know. Like, there are teams that, like you said, aren't happy with just having one or two like really good seasons and then going back to kind of being average. And like Paul Feinbaum said something really interesting where he was like, Florida's had two good coaches in the last 30 years, and the rest of them have been bad or like average or mediocre. So like there's this assumption that Florida should be a top 2, top 3, like one of the best jobs in the country, and the coach should always be winning at that job. Why? Urban Meyer did it and Steve Spurrier did it, and those guys are really good coaches. The rest haven't. Why? Why is there the assumption that Florida should be competing for national championships every year just because it's Florida? You have Georgia right next to you, which if Kirby Smart has proved anything, it's that the right coach at Georgia is pretty good. Is a pretty good combination. And then in the state of Florida, from a recruiting standpoint, it's not like you're in USC where you only really have UCLA to compete with. Like Florida has Florida State and Miami. Like those are 2 big programs.
But I also think that's, but in fairness to the, well, I'm defending the Florida administration here, but in fairness to them, they also could not capitalize recruiting wise on Florida State and Miami being down. So the reason that Florida has not recruited and gotten the players that they need to get in there is not because they're losing them to those schools. It's because they're losing them to Georgia. They're losing them to Alabama. They're losing them to Ohio State. Those are the schools that are coming in now and just setting up shop in Florida, which is funny. The Ohio State thing really got started by Urban Meyer after he then left Florida. So there's that tie there. I think I saw a thing where the top 18 recruits in the class of 2022 from Florida, none of them are going to Florida. None of them are committed to Florida.
Yeah.
That's bad. But
yeah. The one of the reasonings that's been given for Dan Mullen is that he just didn't like to recruit and that they were consistently underperforming in recruiting and he wasn't allocating any resources towards it. Okay. That's fine. That's a perfectly reasonable reason to think that he's not the guy. Some of the other stuff, like the internal dynamics were off. They didn't like his personality. They didn't like the way he was too mean to the media. That's one of the things that I've seen. Who cares? Since when did we care?
People for that?
Yeah, since when did we care about the way coaches interact with the media? That's the first time that's ever happened.
Yeah, if that was the case. Yeah,
some of the reasons have been like, well, the guy gave up 52 points to Samford at home, and we just don't like that because this is Florida, and we got to figure out reasons to justify doing this. Like, just say it wasn't working and you wanted to go in a different direction. That's fine. Don't tell me, well, he didn't get along with the media and we need somebody that knows how to play the game and knows how to talk right. No, you don't.
That's not, no, you really
no, you don't.
No one cares about that. That's never part of the equation. But do you think that Florida needs to have a guy like, and now it's become like Kirby Smart because he also, he's been recruiting very well and they get after it on the recruiting trail. B, he also said the thing about, if you're not recruiting, that's basically it for you. And that you have to have the players. I'm paraphrasing, but it was a good quote. Do you think that Florida has to have a guy like that?
I think every college has to have a guy like that. This is the difference between college coaches and NFL coaches. Dan Mullen could probably go to the NFL and be a pretty successful NFL head coach because he's really good from a schematic standpoint, from a play calling standpoint. He just has no interest in recruiting, which I'd be curious to talk to people who were around, what's his face? The Texas Tech guy that went to Arizona. Kingsbury. Yeah. I'd be curious to talk to people that were around him when he was in Lubbock. And kind of get a vibe for how he felt about recruiting because he's having pretty successful. We joked about him failing upward when he got fired from Texas Tech.
We made those jokes,
but they started the year 8-1, if I have my numbers correct.
And Mullen was a guy that was always talked about as as a potential NFL guy.
Yeah,
when he was in Starkville. Yeah.
I think the biggest thing with college is you have to embrace recruiting and you have to. You have to want to do it every single day of the year, 365 days. You just have to. I think that's the most important part of the job right now. Like it's not schematics. I don't think it's not, how you talk to the media. It's not how you manage a locker room. Now, some of those things are pretty important, but like recruiting is the lifeblood of a college football team. You've played NCAA 14. If you don't do well recruiting, you don't do well on the field.
That is 100% correct. You get out there in NCAA 14 with those 2 stars, it's not going to go well for you.
How do you turn, I don't know, random Marshall? I played with Marshall one time. How do you turn Marshall into a consistent national championship threat? You start signing 5-star classes. That's what happens.
NC State used to be my squad because you could do the red on red pant jersey combination. And I would do that and turn around NC State.
You could do red on red with Nebraska.
You could?
Did you ever do red on red with Nebraska?
Okay, so I didn't play with Nebraska as much just because we were here, right? At that point, probably. And so, I'd like to pick someone else and go that way.
I played a lot with Oregon. I think.
Yeah, I've played a bunch with Oregon.
I don't think I'm in a small group of people here when I say that my team selection was based entirely off of how many uniform combinations you had.
Absolutely. So,
yeah.
I still do that. 2K. Yeah, definitely.
Who has the best? Who has the best kits?
Charlotte, because you could go with the old school.
Oh, the old school,
yeah,
the mismatched
Charlotte
pinstripes.
Yeah, I love those jerseys.
Those were good. Okay, let's pivot and talk about Nebraska now. Now that we're however many minutes in, Adrian Martinez is not going to play Friday against Iowa. This is his 4th year. So if this is it, this is it. He has a chance to come back. I saw somebody say the other day that there is a possibility, like there's a scenario out there where he comes back for 22, plays 4 games, redshirts the rest, and then comes back for 23, which could still technically happen. The choice facing him right now is, do I want to play at Nebraska in 22? He could try to go to the NFL. He could try a grad transfer to somewhere else, or he could stay at Nebraska. But, we're not going to get that final hurrah moment. We're not going to get that final redemptive moment that Scott Frost has been talking about for a few weeks with Adrian. He's not going to play against Iowa. I'm not going to, I don't want to get all preachy and tell people how they should react to Adrian Martinez in the final game. I know he's sort of a hot button player. I know he's a divisive player. I personally am just very sad by the situation. It makes me sad. I wish that he would have one more. I mean, we keep talking about, one more opportunity. He just needs another opportunity, and he keeps coming up short. I wish he would have one more opportunity to play, particularly in front of the home crowd, if this is going to be the last Nebraska game of his career. And I don't know if it's going to be the last one or not. It sounds like Scott Frost wants to have a conversation with him. It sounds like Frost wants him to go through senior day stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he won't come back. It makes me sad that potentially his last game will be spent on the sideline because of an injury. It just makes me sad. So any of you guys that are going to the game, or you can react however you want. I don't care. Do you? It makes me personally sad. Greg, how do you feel about the whole situation as a whole as we kind of look back?
You stole my thunder because I didn't expect you to say that. And because I actually feel the same way. And it was weird on kind of how this all kind of came out. I had to take a little inside baseball here. So it came out obviously at the Scott Frost press conference. When the Scott Frost press conference is happening, I am usually doing something else. I'm usually in the room, but kind of working on the piece that I have to do for Monday morning. This time, though, Ben Stilley was in the hallway. And so I wasn't even in the room when he announced it. So I'm out in the hallway talking to Ben Stilley. I come in and people are just furiously typing away. I haven't really checked our internal Slack, because I'm starting to get my stuff together for what we've got going, for what I have to get going on later. And so I didn't know what happened. And so then after the press conference was over is when I actually found out that that Scott Frost announced that Adrian Martinez is out. And then I just kind of sat there and I'm like, dang, if that's it, that's really sad. That was honestly my very first thought, in that time late, technically, finding out that it happened, that the announcement was made. It bummed me out because, like Frost, I do want Adrian Martinez to be able to have that type of moment, like you said too, particularly in front of the home crowd. And it doesn't feel like he's going to get that. The injury complicates this whole thing, though, when it comes to long term. Because if it's a significant shoulder injury that will need surgery, he would not be ready to go right away for wherever he's playing football at in 2022, right?
Yep.
And so that's also part of this equation and discussion too. But it's just tough to see if that's the end, to see it kind of go like that in another game in which he had a gritty performance, I guess is the way I would describe it now, knowing what we know about his shoulder, his throwing shoulder at that. Another game in which he basically played well enough for them to win, except for a critical mistake or two. Even though I don't know that those interceptions cost them the game necessarily. Like, it's just that I think that though that Wisconsin game basically summed up his career all in one. Some very brilliant plays, some maddening plays, some plays that he can only make, and then also an injury, because that's been a big part of the Adrian Martinez experience throughout his 4 years at Nebraska. Prolific statistically, but also a lot of injury.
Yeah. The last drive against Wisconsin, if it's the last drive, it's a good encapsulation. First and 10, and you get a holding penalty, and you're at 1st and 20. You can't have a holding penalty there, but they did, and now he's at 1st and 20, and 3 straight incomplete passes sets up 4th and 20, and you have now put yourself in a very, 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 very difficult position. You know, like the missed PI sucked. It was stupid. It was terrible. It should have been called. I get that. Frost had every right to be pissed. But they just came up short. And that's kind of what it been, kind of what it has been. And you said, like, you don't know that the interceptions cost them the game. I don't feel that either. They didn't directly cost them the game, but like, this has been Adrian Martinez's entire career at Nebraska. He feels like he has to make 14-point plays every time he throws the ball, because he kind of has to, because like, they don't have the margin for error. So like, you talk about an early 4th quarter interception, while it doesn't directly cost them the game, they need every possession they can get, because at any given moment, they're going to have a holding penalty that puts them into a 4th and 20 situation. And, some of it is on Adrian, and a lot of it isn't. A lot of it, and this was what I wrote in my column, this is what I've written all season, their offensive line is bad. It's bad. And if they protected him, he would look different. And when we've seen him have protection, he has looked different. Here's kind of the I want to talk to you about his legacy, because he's going to have. Now, I don't know if this is it. I don't know if he's going to have another season to continue writing this thing. But right now, he's played 4 years. We can kind of look at this whole picture. His legacy is going to be very interesting in terms of like how he is viewed as a Nebraska quarterback, because Nebraska's had really good quarterbacks. Nebraska has had statistically excellent quarterbacks with a lot of warts. Nebraska has had winning quarterbacks. Nebraska has had productive quarterbacks who lost games. So I tweeted this. This is perfect. I tweeted this Monday. I tweeted out Adrian Martinez's Husker career with a few of his records. I'm going to read you the records in a second, but it was highlighting his achievements. Okay. I did not include turnovers or fumbles or losses. The comments: need to add record number of fumbles and interceptions. All that doesn't score points in critical drives. All-time leader in L's. Heck of a gamer, decent quarterback. But like Emmitt Smith, stats only tell part of the story. Too many of those games are simply due to games played. Bill Belichick says stats are for losers. Someone else said now do turnovers. Someone else said 4 straight losing seasons. You either like him or you really don't like him. And so here's Adrian Martinez's career. Let me just read you this stuff. It's a very long list. He's going to leave this program as one of the most decorated quarterbacks to ever play here. He's the only 3-time captain in program history. He is the all-time leader in total yards of offense produced for a career. He is second all-time in career passing yards. He is 4th all-time in total touchdowns produced. He has the highest total offense yards per game average for a season. He has the highest completion percentage over the course of a season in program history and the highest completion percentage in a game. He has 19 career 300-yard games, which are the most all-time. He has 16 career 250-yard passing games, most all-time. He has 5 career 400-yard games, most all-time. And as a quarterback, he has 5 100-yard rushing performances. He also has a freshman season that includes the most passing yards in a season by a freshman, the 6th most rushing yards in a season by a freshman, not just quarterback, freshman. Nebraska's had outstanding running backs. He had the 6th best rushing season as a freshman. He has the most completions in a season, which is really just like, it's a product of their scheme and modern football, but still. Highest completion percentage in a season for a freshman, most total offense in a season for a freshman, most total touchdowns in a season for a freshman, most passing touchdowns in a season for a freshman. So he has all of that. All of that. Now, here are the top 4 quarterbacks in Nebraska's record books in terms of touchdowns produced over a career. Number 1 is Tommy Armstrong. Number 2 is Eric Crouch. Number 3 is Taylor Martinez. Number 4 is Adrian Martinez. Those are names that you probably would have expected to hear, right? So here's those top 4. Turnovers, record as a starter. Tommy Armstrong Jr. had 44 interceptions and 22 fumbles in 45 games. He lost 10 of those fumbles. So that's 54 turnovers in 45 games.
Yeah.
He had a 30-14 record as a starter.
I think people are surprised at how good his record was based on how many arrows he took. But okay, keep going.
I do not have Eric Crouch's fumble numbers because no one tracks fumbles for whatever reason, and they're wonky, and he played far enough back to where there's just not reliable information. So I could probably go look, but I need more time. Eric Crouch has 90 career touchdowns, 25 interceptions in 43 games. He had a 35-7 record as a starter. Obviously won a Heisman.
Yeah.
If we're talking about who's the best quarterback to play at Nebraska in the last 20 years, it's Eric Crouch. Yeah. Which actually could be an interesting discussion if you're talking about quarterback or player. Taylor Martinez is number 3 on the touchdown list. He had 29 interceptions and 45 fumbles in 44 games. But he only lost 13 of those fumbles, which is incredible. So 42 turnovers in 44 games. As a starter, he had a 29-14 record. I remember the Taylor Martinez days, just like I remember the Tommy Armstrong days. Specifically because my dad was always yelling at the TV, stop turning the ball over, stop throwing interceptions, stop fumbling it. They're never going to win more than 9 games with Taylor Martinez as the quarterback, which, by the way, is an incredible statement to make.
Now, when you say that out loud, it's
an incredible statement to make.
Yeah.
Okay. 29-14 as a starter. Adrian Martinez, number 4, 30 interceptions, 31 fumbles, 18 of them lost. So the most lost fumbles of anybody on this list in 39 games, 48 turnovers in 39 games. He has a 14-24 record as a starter. So I give you all this stuff at the beginning. He is one of, statistically, and in terms of production, the best quarterbacks to play at Nebraska. Now, you can qualify that by saying, well, the scheme helped him. Well, modern offense helped him. Well, modern defenses helped him. That's a function of games played. You can talk about all that stuff. You'd be justified in saying all that stuff. But in terms of career numbers, he is in Nebraska's record books. He's one of the most productive quarterbacks in the history of his program. But if you're talking about the top quarterbacks, he has the worst record as a starter, which we can also talk about why you shouldn't use team record as a quarterback metric. And he has the most turnovers of anybody. And that right there is what makes Adrian's legacy so hard to evaluate. So, Greg, I ask you now, having said that and given you all that information, When you look back at these last 4 years of Adrian Martinez, what stands out in your head? Is it the losses? Is it the gaudy numbers? Is it the turnovers? Is it something else?
It is the turnovers, but it is so interesting, and how this evolves over time to me is going to be very interesting, because it has all, as we saw kind of in the QB bracket, like how people feel about these quarterbacks over time does shift.
Yep.
And so that will be really interesting to me. But I went back and I tweeted this out earlier this week, like my first like long form story on Adrian after he committed or signed back in the 2018 class. It was like a different kind of QB, like, so I think was the title of it. And if you had told me on that day that story went into the Hail Varsity magazine, that all of those numbers that you read off to begin with, that's the career that he's going to have, I would have said, oh my God, take that. And that not only that, because I still don't know the second part of that, not only that, this program has taken off in the exact way that Scott Frost was brought here to do, right? Like, that's the thing that I will always kind of think about when it comes to Adrian Martinez. There are a ton of big numbers. And then he also kind of embodies the thing that's held the program back, in my opinion, which has been repeated errors, both big and small, like whether it like, and he's not obviously out there getting penalties, but that counts in the big and small thing. Like, so whether it's penalties, untimely turnovers, whatever, like a lot of that is kind of wrapped up into what his career has been. And so it's like I said, it's really, really complicated and it's difficult. But I also, in my mind, play a little bit of the what if game, because not only, you said, how many starts was that? Like 49 starts that he's had?
38.
38, sorry, there's 49 turnovers in 38 games. That's 38 games. There are other games available. There's a handful of games that he's also missed in his career. So where are those numbers if he doesn't miss those games? Where are those numbers if the injuries that caused him to later miss those games didn't happen and he was able to produce at a higher level in those other games, right? You get what I'm saying? Like, also, where the heck are those numbers if you cut those turnovers in half? Because those drives would have, in theory, continued going. Like, there's just so much there when it comes to, and not only the numbers, I guess, it's the win-losses too, because then I know I don't think that you love the win-losses as a quarterback metric. I'm okay-ish with it.
No, stop using them.
No, especially in this case where you have a program that's lost so many one-score games. I think it's 19 under Frost. And you have that many turnovers. Those turnovers and lost drives directly correlate to you losing those one-score games, to me. So that has to be part of it too. Like, it's just really difficult because, and the other part of this that I think brings out such passionate defense of Adrian Martinez. I get why the anger is there, and it's about the turnovers. It's about the losses, to be honest. If the turnovers are there, but the losses were not, it'd be fine. But the reason,
case in point, Tommy Armstrong.
Yeah, Tommy Armstrong. But the other thing that, and this is something that Adrian and Tommy also have in common, is that they're great guys, right? And that people really, really like them, and that there's nothing like Adrian Martinez off the field has been so good. He's been such an ambassador of the program that I think that's part of his legacy. And I think that's also something that his defenders, if you want to call it that, also like to point out.
It's worth pointing out here that Taylor Martinez is basically like 2 games away from owning the all-time touchdown record in a career. And if he plays his last season, if he doesn't get hurt and only appears in 4 games, like if he plays that last season all the way through, he's probably the leader in career touchdowns and probably career offense. So like if you play the what if game, like he would make this a lot easier if he had been healthy for his senior season, because then we wouldn't be talking about, well, Adrian is the all-time leader in total offense, and then it wouldn't be like,
You
well,
also
that's
have Tommy
Nebraska.
knocked down a couple pegs too, right?
Yeah. You'd also be
like,
like, well, that's Nebraska under Scott Frost. Lots of yards, not a lot of points, not a lot of wins. The record as a quarterback metric is just like, okay, so is the defense a 3-8 defense
this year? No.
Okay, is Adrian a 3-8 quarterback?
No, I don't think he's a 3-8 quarterback.
I don't think he is either, and that's what makes this tricky. Is Adrian Martinez, in a literal sense, is a 14-24 quarterback, in a literal sense, but at the beginning of this season, I think most people would have said he's the most talented quarterback in the Big Ten before you knew what CJ Stroud was going to do.
Right.
Now, I guess the most talented non-Ohio State quarterback in the Big Ten, I guess, would be.
Still amazing with what Nebraska did to him. Like, that will always, like, as they continue to just roll up points and yards on people, and he looks like maybe a Heisman favorite. Nebraska's defense that day is, yeah.
They've scored 117 points in the 2 games since playing Nebraska, and they scored 26 points against Nebraska. It's remarkable. Yeah, you're right. It's remarkable what they did. Adrian, I just don't know. I don't know how he's going to be viewed, because you're exactly right when you said, like, as we have gotten a few years removed from all of those other quarterbacks, because we did that quarterback bracket thing in the offseason, as we have gotten a few years removed from those careers, people look back on them more fondly, which it's just human nature. It tends to happen. It's nostalgia. I don't know how Adrian is going to be viewed, because with Tommy, you've got a ton of interceptions. You've got thrown off your back foot. You've got, like, head scratching, like, God, what are you doing, dude? Moments. But he won games. He won football games, and they won football games, I should say. And with Adrian, you've got, God, what are you doing? Moments. And you've got, oh my God, he's the only player on the field that could make that play. Holy crap. Moments. And they don't win football games with him, and they haven't won football games with him. And I am firmly in the camp of, if they had a better offensive line, they would have won more games this year. I think I've written, and I've also said that they have a 3-win offensive line, but that's just where they're at right now. But I mean, he's got 48 turnovers in 39 games. It's just, as a guy that has as much usage as a quarterback has, to average more than one turnover every game over the course of your 4-year career is hard. It's hard. And it gets back to the thing where I talked about with them not having any margin for error. Those things, I mean, you can go game by game and say, like, yeah, this crippled a scoring opportunity. This hurt them. This set up a score for the other team. This was a scoop and score. Like, we talk about the Ohio State game from last year, and I'm like, yeah, the fumble scoop and score that he had to start the second half in that game effectively ended that game. And there's been a handful of those over his career where you've been like, well, they didn't, they effectively ended games. And it's just, I think that if I was in the stands on Friday and he takes part in senior day and he kind of runs out on the field pregame, I would cheer for him. I would give him a round of applause, because I think he deserves it. But I also, I don't know. I think this is going to be one of the most interesting legacy questions in a while.
Yes, but I don't, depending on when you guys listen to this, I do expect him to go through senior day. And I also I don't know, I shouldn't say expect. I would hope that he gets a thunderous ovation from the crowd. And I think that there is and it's for a couple of reasons. It's not just that he was statistically prolific. It is also that we have come to find out that he played with a broken jaw for a lot of the year. We also know that he played with his shoulder injury in the second half and tried to gut it out and help the team win a game at Wisconsin. And there are numerous things like that for him in his career. So like, I just think that on everything that he's given the program, I think that he needs a monster ovation at that game. But it's just going to be really interesting. And how long, and I'm surprised that we've actually gone this long without saying this, how much his legacy is going to be tied to Scott Frost, the coach legacy, is also going to be interesting too. Because once this, like, let's say this is the end for Adrian, Scott Frost gets to begin to write a new chapter of his coaching tenure at Nebraska without Martinez. And that's going to, I think, shape some of the conversation around Martinez as well. Because if it turns out that Martinez was by far and away the best quarterback that he brought here, that's going to also give, some different ammunition for the fight too. So it'll be interesting. There's a lot there when it comes to Adrian Martinez's legacy. And that's why you wish so much that for him, because the conversation would just be so different if the team had just been okay, or he had gotten that signature moment, which he just didn't get. Like, when we thought that he had, and was it the Iowa game his freshman year, when that picture that everybody loves happened in Iowa City, where he's got, like, he scores a touchdown and, like, pumps his fist out in the air, and, like, the photo of it. Was that his freshman year?
Yes, I think so.
I think it was. And I think we thought that was it. That was the moment. And then, they lost the last second field goal. And it just kind of feels like that was a foreshadowing moment for so many things to go.
Yeah, I think the sadness comes from he's just not going to have a chance to control because the narrative will change with him if on Friday Logan Smothers leads them to a win.
Yes.
Undeniably, the discourse with Adrian will change. And that'll be an interesting time if that happens.
So I do want to make sure I ask you one question. It's your podcast, but I want to ask you one question about Adrian's legacy. It relates to that. Does it change if he goes somewhere else after this year? That is, that's on the table. It's 2021, like, college football. So, like,
I've people keep asking me, like, do you think Adrian's going to come back? And I keep saying, if I was a confidant, which I'm not, and I was advising him, which I'm not, on what to do, I would tell him, maybe go somewhere else. Because if you have success at that next place, it'll set you up better. And you're not really sure what next year is going to look like. And if you choose to go somewhere else, I don't think anyone's going to hold it against you. Certainly not here. I think people will be rooting for you. And you can sort of pick your next situation. And you can pick what you think is going to be the best situation. If he has success at the next spot, if there is a next spot, I think it will change the way Scott Frost is viewed. And this kind of ties into, I was going to ask you next, if Frost fails at Nebraska, what does that do to the way that Adrian Martinez is viewed? If Scott Frost fails at Nebraska, is Adrian Martinez viewed as a wasted talent?
Yes.
And if in that same vein, if Adrian Martinez goes somewhere else, which again, I'm not saying I have any inside knowledge on, I'm not reporting anything. If he goes somewhere else and he does have success, I think that would also, it would reflect poorly on Frost, and you would get some of those wasted talent remarks about here. The other side of this is they tried Luke McCaffrey and it failed spectacularly.
Yes.
And he has gone on to other places and not had a ton of success. Not had much success. Depending on what happens Friday with Logan Smothers, we will have a few glimpses of what Smothers is as a quarterback, but very few. And he'll be going into his third year in college, and he'll be kind of a question mark. So like, I think some of what's going to happen is people are going to start questioning Scott Frost's ability to, they already have ability to evaluate quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I think that adds such an interesting layer to all of this, and it becomes I think an indictment on Frost in a way that's really hard to overcome, to be honest, if Adrian were to go somewhere else and have success. Like I do, but it would be a fascinating thing to watch on a weekly basis to see, because it would be, does Adrian make those spectacular plays but also have to turn over somewhere else, and then if his team is better, is it just because the team is better and not necessarily, it's just, there's just a lot there. But I do think that the wasted talent angle is something that would be a large part of the conversation if that were the case, because I just think that that's the natural place to go, and will be a major indictment on Frost.
Yeah. Breaking news on the podcast, CBS Sports' Dennis Dodd is reporting that Luke Fickle is going to stay at Cincinnati and that recruits are being told as such. I don't know if that's breaking news, but it's
that was where, remember, I've said that for a while. I thought that was where that was headed. He was going to stay there. It seems like he's comfortable there, and you get your shot at the Big 12, which I think is a big part of that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes
go chase a different. He does not need to go chase a bigger job, because he's now got technically one, and I think they are making investments in facilities and that sort of thing. Like, I think that's a good spot for him.
I was talking to my brother about this the other day. He has spent his entire coaching career in the state of Ohio. Going to Los Angeles or Baton Rouge would be a significant change. He has a family that factors into this, and he seems like somebody that would value that as a pretty high priority, what his family's interested in or comfortable with. And like, Cincinnati is number 4 in the college football playoff rankings.
They did pop in at number 4.
Like, their number 4 is an American school, and they're going to be in the Big 12 in a couple of years, and Oklahoma less Big 12 at that. So like, if you can get into the college football playoff now as an American team, then your brand is established as like, hey, if you have a good season, sure, we'll put you in the playoff. I don't necessarily think it matters if they get killed.
It's such a big deal, though, too, for recruits, because now you can say that, hey, if we're having this kind of success here and getting in the playoff, imagine what we're going to do when we get to the Big 12. It's just such a good proof of concept situation that he finds himself in, right?
Yeah, I mean, USC is a really good job, but like, he's got a pretty good gig.
Yeah.
If Luke Fickle is off the market, and Mel Tucker is off the market, and James Franklin is off the market, and Jimbo Fisher is staying at Texas A&M, which he keeps saying that he is.
Yeah, keep saying that.
LSU and USC and Florida, somebody else is bound to come open, right? Something spectacular is going to happen.
Right? Oh, it always seems that way.
One or two of those schools is not going to be happy with the way that this offseason ends.
My prediction is that it's USC. That's what I kind of
think so?
Feeling right now. Even though I don't know how happy are Florida fans going to be with Billy Napier? If that ends up being the case, I don't know how excited you get for that. I think LSU fans would be excited for Dave Aranda, but not in the way that they would be if they stole Jimbo Fisher. But USC feels like the team on the outside looking in because there's just not that many names now. Those guys that you rattled off, if they're staying, who's available?
And this is a product of constantly churning through coaches every year. Like this is what we have gotten to. It's sort of a dry market. I think the names that have been mentioned for USC have been Dave Aranda and Matt Campbell. If Dave Aranda goes to LSU, that would be interesting. But if you're USC, and like you've been open since what, September?
Right. Like they don't.
And you're like, we're going to get the best guy available. And then you end up with Matt Campbell, who is looking at a 4 or 5 loss season with Iowa State this year. You're like, what? We did all of this for that?
Yeah,
what?
I don't know if, his star has kind of dulled. And I don't know. I just don't know what USC, like what direction they go. And I still think that I think someone like Dan Mullen is going to get one of these Power 5 jobs. Like, it was surprising. I know, what his ties are to, like, Washington, for example, but, like, why couldn't he, like, turn up out there? Like,
Matt Campbell's I forgot Washington. Matt Campbell's also been a guy that has been mentioned at Washington because Chris Peterson is leading that search. Washington's also a really good school.
They're an interesting, I would actually, if it's funny, and I have I like the USC job. I like that school. If I had to pick though, if you really told me, hey, either way, you're going to get $4.5 million and you can pick USC or Washington, all things considered, you're giving some strong consideration to Washington because it just feels like there's something weird with like the USC behind the scenes situation. Yeah. Like that would scare me about what's going on out there. And people have won at Washington. And especially as long as USC continues to be down, like you've got a real shot.
So let me bring this back now. And I think some people will roll their eyes or shake their heads at this. So we just talked about the coaches that are off the market. We just talked about USC, LSU, Florida, Washington, basically like fighting over 2 coaches. It sounds like Dave Aranda and Matt Campbell. If Billy Napier goes to one of them, maybe. Like it sounds like Dave Clawson isn't leaving Wake Forest.
Another name off the board. The guy from Coastal Carolina is probably
Jamie Chadwell's there, but he just doesn't get talked about a ton.
That job. Yeah, I don't know if he's at that tier of job. Okay, so also you got like Virginia Tech and schools like that are open. Like that, I think that's a good level for him. I think that'd be a really interesting place, actually.
I also think Virginia Tech is an interesting spot because you are no longer the guy that is following up after Beamer. You're no longer the next guy after Beamer, which is
maybe they just go get his son.
It's the best place to be. You don't want to be the guy after Beamer. You want to be the guy after the guy that's after Beamer.
Yeah.
The legend at a school.
You'd rather be Callahan than Solich.
It's the sweet spot.
Probably not the best example, actually.
Well, I was gonna say it's a sweet spot, but no, it's not. That's not the sweet spot. So all of those names, Billy Napier goes to one of them. So now you're at the point where you're just hiring an unknown, which is what a group of 5 or coordinator guy coming to a big time Power 5 job is, regardless of how successful he was or how surefire a thing you think it is. There's a degree of risk. So if you're at that point with like LSU or Florida, maybe Trev made the right decision.
That sets you up perfectly
this year to just sit on the sideline this year, not pay any buyout money, just sit on the sideline this year and just see what happens.
By the day, it looks like a more big picture, a wiser decision, big picture. It does. I'll give you that. Which
big picture thinking, level-headedness aren't those things that most people say that Nebraska needs and has needed?
That is all true.
Yeah. So I keep ending up as the Scott Frost defender. That's a weird place to be in.
It's a really weird place to be in.
It keeps happening. I'm just saying. It's an interesting way to look at it. Greg, you got to go. I've had you for a long time. Thank you for coming on this podcast, man. I hope you enjoy Thanksgiving. I hope you get all the mac and cheese that you want, and I hope that there is no fall weather to be found. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all of that. I hope you and the family have a very wonderful Thanksgiving.
Same goes to all of you guys listening. I hope you have food comas after just delicious meals. So enjoy the week. Enjoy the weekend. of football action. Thanksgiving week is always a fun week because there's just random football at all hours of the day. We'll be back next week with another podcast. In the meantime, keep reading YaleVarsity.com. Thanks, guys.
A Hurrdat Media Production.